This is the Mod Pod, brought to you by Modality, helping businesses optimize their Microsoft technologies everywhere.
Hello and welcome to episode 20 of the Mod Pod. We have three further topics for you this week, and we are going to talk about Operator Connect. We are going to talk about the legal decision in Portugal about what bosses can and cannot do, and we are going to talk about learning and whether or not community learning is overtaking formal learning. With me, we have Paula Smith, who is a consultant, and we have Chris Irons, who's a managing consultant, and I suggest we get straight into it, and here we go.
Okay, so Operator Connect was launched earlier this year. I just want to see what you guys think about it. Is it going to change the marketplace? Is it going to be a game changer?
So there's been a lot of noise, I think, about Operator Connect. Obviously, definitely from the big players who are getting involved in it. It might be worth. Do you want to just give us sort of a 30-second quick dash as to what Operator Connect is, so that everybody who's listening in understands, I guess?
Yeah. So Operator Connect is a new directly integrated solution from Microsoft, working with vendors who are part of the Operator Connect program, where they are providing PSTN and SBCs as a service, but directly integrated into Teams. So it's very similar from a user and customer experience to the way that that calling plans works, in that customers can acquire numbers, configure them directly on users without having to have SBCs running in their own estate. No direct routing requirement. It's just simply they find a carrier who's part of that Operator Connect program, and they sign an agreement with them to provide their PSTN and calling capabilities into Teams. And really, it's an alternative to calling plans.
I think from my viewpoint, I've probably got quite a simplistic view of the whole sort of telephony thing, because you guys are way more technical than I am. But you've got your calling plans, which is basically Microsoft providing your telephony component into Teams. This is basically other companies doing exactly the same thing, but not through Microsoft's small, medium, large type offering. So I guess if we look at customers who are looking to move their telephony in, what options have you got? You've got some Microsoft calling plans, you've got Operator Connect, you've got direct routing through whether it's hosted by somebody else or or yourself. In my simplistic head, they're all very similar. Is that fair? Is it not fair? It seems to be much of a muchness, really.
I think it comes down to whether you want to manage that equipment yourself and manage the carrier relationship yourself. Obviously, calling plans is the simplest it gets, because everything is Microsoft. You don't really have to worry about anything. You just add numbers from Microsoft to your users or your services within Teams, and that's as simple as it gets, right? I think Operator Connect provides a kind of a middle ground between what Microsoft provides in calling plans and what direct routing provides, which gives that flexibility to organizations to have more management of their telephony. And with that, having to manage the way that SBCs work, how they integrate with your existing on-premise infrastructure, that has an overhead. You need people who understand it within your organization. You need an ability to support it internally as well. Obviously, if you have hosted direct routing, that probably is the next step closer to Operator Connect, because you're having another third party manage it for you, or the carrier indeed might host that SBC direct routing infrastructure for you as well, and that kind of takes away that requirement for your organization to manage that infrastructure and that relationship with the carrier, which is probably a good step. But does Operator Connect just make it generally a lot more simple for organizations to consume phone system? I think it probably does for small to medium enterprises who don't really have a complex telephony or don't have complex telephony requirements. And that's where I see them fitting, where Operator Connect kind of fits. I think it's really those smaller organizations who don't really have any existing complicated telephony needs. All they need is dial tone, but perhaps calling plans as a solution is possibly too expensive because their rate cards aren't particularly competitive, but also
or even available.
Or even availability. Yeah, exactly. Operator Connect is going to expand. Obviously, at the moment, I think there's around 21 then carriers out there who are signed up to the Operator Connect program, and that's going to just increase over time. And there's going to be more people sign up to it. And it may be that a customer's existing incumbent carrier ends up being an Operator Connect vendor as part of that Operator Connect program, or they might already be. And so there's perhaps a more simple migration process to move over to the Operator Connect model.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think the Microsoft calling plans piece hasn't taken up as well as potentially Microsoft thought it might have done. It definitely works for a good number of organizations, but I think when you've got complex telephony and you've got that sort of global reach, it does come unstuck in places. For me, I think there's this whole commoditization story, because if you think once you've actually got your telephony into Teams, whether you continue to use an on-prem SBC for direct routing or whether you then move it into an Operator Connect model, etc., it seems to be a natural progression, because once your dial plans are sorted, you're talking about porting numbers from supplier A to supplier B, which is a little bit like sort of porting your mobile phone contract now, isn't it? So I think there's an element to say that once you've done the hard work, the whole Operator Connecting and not having to have people maintaining kit and all that sort of stuff, there's got to be quite a big uptake for it, I would have thought. I mean, we've done a lot of stuff in the past. I mean, Paula, you've got SBCs and you've done telephony migrations and all sorts of things like that. I guess, from a customer base, if they had the option of removing that management layer from that voice infrastructure, it's got to be appealing, isn't it? No, that's all right. That's all right.
And I have to edit this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it offers a stepping stone in a market where Microsoft couldn't cater for, to be honest with you. I think it's a really good idea. I'm so sorry, guys.
Yeah, it's really gone, isn't it? Don't worry.
Yeah.
Grab yourself a drink. We'll carry on talking.
Sorry.
But no, that's fine. But yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the whole way that the voice piece has gone, it's becoming it's becoming greatly simplified as we go through this journey. I said journey. I find myself every time I say that. But it is, because you think about it, once you've actually made the decision to go to Teams, and I don't know, maybe you've used your SBC infrastructure that was used for Skype for Business. Once you've got it into Teams, it's kind of, you've got almost everything you need in place. So why would you not just turn around if you've got an on-prem, BT manage your numbers, for example, on-prem, and they're part of Operator Connect? Why would you not just go, actually, yeah, just do it for us?
Yeah, I think when you compare Operator Connect to carrier hosted SBCs with direct routing, there really isn't much between it, because at that point you're handing off everything to the carrier anyway. I think the kind of positive thing that I think Operator Connects is that simplified management experience you get within the Teams admin center, of just being able to just say, right, I want a number today, I want to attach it to this user or this call queue, and I'm just going to do it, and within 10 minutes you've got your number and you're ready to go with your user or your new auto attendant or call queue.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're using direct routing, whether it's hosted by a carrier or third party, you're going to have to go through a process to get that configured, and that's going to take time, and you're probably talking minimum 24 hours to get something new in service like that. And I think that's where Operator Connect really comes into its own. And the only reason why calling plans probably didn't get there is because when you go to Microsoft, you put all your eggs in one basket. Suddenly all your numbers are with them.
Yeah.
And what happens if you have some other service which isn't Teams, where you need one of those numbers connected to? And that then becomes a problem. But if that is with your existing carrier, who gives you that flexibility to say, well, these number ranges or these particular individual numbers we're going to associate to Operator Connect or direct routing, but these other ones we're going to send through our other SBC service that we're providing with you to some other system. We can do that, and I think that's the flexibility you get with Operator Connect, and that carrier flexibility that you get, especially with kind of really experienced SIP carriers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They can apply calls, and you have the ability to get the CDR and review the call data the same way as a normal call.
Yeah, it is just taking away what is probably now an unnecessary layer of complexity.
Yeah.
There's always going to be the particularly complicated clients, and we know who they are, the difficult ones. But yeah, I mean, if you're sort of operating in some of the big countries, maybe across Europe or whatever it is, and you've just got straight telephony requirement, really not turn around to your carriers and just say, yeah, go on, do it. It's got to be appealing.
Yeah,
Yes.
I definitely think so. I think there's, when you start getting to the enterprise market, I think you have a lot of complexity within those environments, which probably makes Operator Connect not viable. Organizations have really well-defined automated provisioning processes, and maybe the Operator Connect model wouldn't work there, because you can't necessarily get Operator Connect in all countries that these enterprise customers cover, and then you're having to have one provisioning process for one country and another provisioning process for another, which probably doesn't work. Direct routing, you can standardize across the board. I think because of the limited countries that Operator Connect's in at the moment, that probably and the number of carriers who have signed up to it, I think that's always going to limit some large organizations. But SMEs,
they're going to become the minority in the case, aren't they? The big enterprises.
Yeah, I think so. And the more of those big enterprises which move to centralized SIP and get single SIP carriers providing services into most of their countries, that problem kind of goes away.
Yeah, and I think as well, excuse me, you've passed it to me now, Paula, thank you.
Sorry.
I think when you also take into account that Microsoft have upped their telephony SLA to 4 nines, and you've got some of these big carriers in the background who will have, let's face it, the carrier grade SPC infrastructure, your risk is also sort of starting to drop about using cloud telephony as well. So yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting time to watch. But I think we've already started to notice a drop in general on the number of SPCs that we're deploying new. Yeah, obviously we've got some that are being reused from I can't even say it now, Skype for Business deployments, but there's definitely a drop, and I think that's got to be just down to the direction that the telephony world is moving in, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I think most organizations want to move to a kind of monthly subscription model or something like that, where they're not having to fork out in huge capital expenditure costs, and moving to either a hosted direct routing solution or something like Operator Connect is really quite attractive to them. So I can see it's definitely the way.
It's even available for conferencing as well, the Operator Connect.
Yeah, which makes a big difference as well, isn't it, if you've already got that well established. So so I think it's going to happen, isn't it? I know it's sort of relatively early days at the moment, but if it's going to gain momentum quite quickly, I would think, and no bad thing.
I don't think it's going to be utilized heavily by large enterprise. So I think it's going to be mid-sized companies. Yeah. But the market for calling plans never allowed them to take advantage of that. So
yes, I think the answer is yes. It is going to make a big difference, I think. But
be interesting to watch the next 12 months and see just how many carriers signed up to the program, because I think that will really, really show how much those carriers think that it is a big deal.
Yeah, and also to watch the enterprise space to see whether or not people do end up making that strategic decision to go that way, and just changing to carriers who are on it.
Yeah,
even on a global level, who knows?
Just like calling plans as well, you can kind of mix and match your telephony integration as well. So a single enterprise customer can go Operator Connect within a number of countries, but then they can provide a kind of centralized direct routing function to leverage some of their on-premise telephony services like contact centers and things like that. So you don't have to just commit to just Operator Connect. You can actually do a bit of a hybrid of both to cover all bases.
And you can use a downstream SPC as well in order to migrate to Operator Connect fully. So
really that's good. True. Yeah. So yes, we think it's gonna change, but it's gonna be a slow one again. Cool. All right. Right. I suggest that we move on to topic 2.
Okay, our next topic will be, we're just going to talk a bit about the Portuguese government. In the last few weeks, they passed a law where the employee is no longer allowed to contact the employers outside business hours.
Okay. So basically,
what do you guys think about
that? I can't contact either of you after 5:30. Yeah, it's a real interesting one, I think, here, because for me, I think there's a couple of things. One is the practicalities of it, and 2 is the cultural difference between the UK way of working and other parts of Europe. So
depends on the industry as well.
Yeah.
It doesn't suit every industry.
Well,
IT industry, I'm not so sure if it's completely, for example, Fleet Street.
So
if to be contactable.
If you're in journalism, I'm sorry, I can't tell you about this amazing breaking story
until 9 o'clock tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. I guess there's a cynical thing to say that if people introduce that, will HR teams or organizations just change people's contracts to say, in appropriate circumstances, we'll need to contact you outside of business hours or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I think it sounds rather idealistic. I like the concept of not bothering people in their personal time, but it's not something that I would tend to do anyway. Or if I do, I send people a message in the fact that it's a brain dump. It doesn't mean I need a response there and then. But I don't know about the practicalities of having that as a legal no-no.
Exactly, yeah. And the companies who will contact the employees, they will get fined. So,
do we know how big the fine is? Is it a slap across the wrist?
Couldn't find out. I've tried to find out, but I couldn't find out. It's definitely a monetary figure to it.
Yeah, I think they're attacking it the wrong way, really. There are needs within businesses to communicate with people outside of working hours. We work in those types of environments. Systems go down. There are occasions which necessitate having to communicate with employees out of hours. But I think the better way to approach it would be to say, look, you as an employee shouldn't feel that you have to respond to a message out of hours, and bosses and managers or colleagues who send messages shouldn't necessarily expect a response outside of working hours. And I think that's where the cultural change should be. And I think obviously home working and COVID has made flexible working hours far more common. So people with that have thought, right, I can message people whenever, and they might be available because they might be working different hours than normal. So I might get a response. But I think that's the key, is might get a response.
Yeah.
And I think the culture should be set that staff members who are not currently in their working hours shouldn't feel like they have to respond, and it should be completely acceptable to respond when they get in and start their working day the following day. And I think that's the thing which needs to probably be baked in.
Yeah. Anything that is done in extreme as well is also counterproductive. So there's often, a few departments that potentially the company that you're working for, if you are getting bothered, every day and after hours, potentially is not the right company for you. However, occasionally for you to be part of, a conversation or important call, I don't think that's a big deal. I think it is really drastic what they're trying to implement. This is just my humble opinion.
Yeah, I think you're both right there. I think this for me is not a legal issue; it's a cultural issue. You need to have that cultural lead from the very top to not get into the habit of just sending emails out at just because you're working at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. There's tools in there to, Outlook tells you, why don't you consider sending this at so-and-so when that person's going to be back online. So, I think it's all perfectly manageable. It's some of the habits of individuals within the organization. You need to make it almost socially unacceptable to contact somebody. But also the other thing as well, I guess, is it's a bit like the boy who cried wolf. If you are repeatedly sending messages outside of the working hours, that becomes the norm. But actually, if you don't send messages outside the working hours and then you do send one, it's obviously important at that point. So you probably would take more notice. It's like, oh, hang on a second, I've got an email from Steve at 10 o'clock at night, something's wrong. I mean, just still insinuates that I'm checking my emails at 10 o'clock at night, which probably is true. But yeah, I don't think you can enforce this thing. I think you've got to drive it from a a user experience and an employee sort of welfare type angle. It's your choice if you want to work late, I guess, but
Yeah.
Well, they drive away as well. Certain organizations actually moving to Portugal and headquarter there, actually, if they are going to be, having all those sorts of legal issues. Because occasionally you do have to contact someone out of hours. It's not every day. It's expected almost that occasionally you will receive an email, you will receive a telephone call.
It'd be interesting as well to see what the process around what the grievance would be. Do you complain to your boss and then to HR, or do you go to HR and say, hang on, my boss is messaging me outside of hours? I mean, that's not going to lead to a great working relationship, is it? So surely by that point it's already slightly dead in the water, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Do the HR department report themselves to the authorities? It doesn't sound like.
Sorry. We've got one of our managers is messaging one of our people outside of work. It's like, I can't see how you would practically enforce it. I don't know
how it's implemented. It will be interesting to see when it must be more of a loose law and to try and discourage it rather than actually really enforce it. But I think the key is just socially making it, a bit more unacceptable, as you say, to bombard employees with messages and expect responses in the evenings, because I think that isn't right in most industries. But we were talking the other day about that. Was it KPMG or some other? I can't remember which organisation it was now, but their bankers. It wasn't KPMG, but anyway, their bankers.
JP Morgan, the CIO or whatever it was. That
was it. And he just said, look, our staff are paid exceptionally well, and with that comes an extended working day. And it's not, it might not be written in contract that they have to work these extended hours, but it's expected, and people then have the choice as to whether they want to work for that company or not. So I think there are exceptions where people have the choice as to whether they work in that type of environment or not, and if they don't want to work in that type of environment, they can leave. But I think that's an extreme case, and I think most organizations expect their staff to work their contracted hours, but to be there available if there is a crisis or something which does need immediate attention. And that's sometimes
it. And I think it's got that rule has got to be aimed at protecting, I would have said, some of the lower grade employees who potentially don't have feel they have the power to be able to turn around and go, no, I'm not answering, or just not answering it until the following day. I think you're absolutely right. The likes of the JP Morgan bloke, when that was reported, that is, you are getting large amounts of money, and it probably is. It just goes with the territory. I'm going to make loads of money. I'm going to flog myself into the ground for a period of time, and that's the way it's going to be. So I guess this decision on Portugal is to, stop the people who are being pushed to work in the evening, rather than just thinking, actually, do you know what, I've got some stuff to finish off, I'll jump on for a couple of hours and kill it. But again, even best will in the world, if that is the motivation and that's what they're really targeting, it's not how it sort of comes across in the reporting, which journalists, I think, have a way of spinning things to make them more sensational than necessarily they are. But it still comes back down to, how do you police it? Are you basically just saying that someone who's feeling slightly sort of beaten up by their boss can turn around to HR and go, sorry, I want to report them for messaging me outside of work? I think there's a difficult conversation in there, because effectively you're dobbing your line report in. So when do you pull that metaphorical trigger?
Exactly, and they also seeing an increase after COVID of people working from home. So they're trying to enforce that they don't work above and beyond more hours, because they already be seeing that they're working more hours than they should. So potentially they're just trying to think about the future and saying, oh, more and more people are going to work from home from now on. So therefore, they're even actually thinking about forcing the employees to pay for the electricity bill, increased electricity bill, and telephony costs and internet, etc.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
I wonder if
go.
I wonder if this is more a case of, in Portugal specifically, whether this comes down to kind of employment tribunals and things where they actually need to justify why, or somebody has a complaint against a company and has to be able to justify why or build up a case against their employer, and they can then cite the fact that this abusive use of out of hours communication was kind of systematic within that organization. That might be the sort of thing which that law then supports the employee to actually kind of defend themselves in those type of cases. I wonder if it's that kind of thing.
I agree with you.
I was going to say, now you said that.
The minister, she cited that in the article, Chris, to be honest with you, with the Guardian. Yeah, she did. She's just trying to preempt potentially us going back into the dark ages when the unions used to kind of dictate and, push a few laws, changes, etc. So I think you're absolutely right.
I suspect day to day it's not going to change things much at all, but at least it gives employees a bit of protection.
Cool. Well, you won't get emails out from me at the end of the day.
But if we do,
I'll be hiding from anybody else. Cool. All right. Brilliant. Should we tackle the third and final then? Right. So my topic for this week is has community-based learning, so your YouTubes, your forums, blogs, whatever it is, largely replaced formal structured training. And the reason I ask this is because there seems to be the pace of change of technology is now so fast. It seems to me that there's a growing pattern that the community can react to that quicker than people who are formulating structured courses. So do we think this is a thing that's going to carry on, or am I barking up the wrong tree?
No, you're absolutely correct. I think it's a taste of things to come. For example, I was studying for exam for Microsoft Teams, and within 6 months, everything, all the videos that I watched was completely out of date. So you might as well not bother with those items and literally just go to TechNet, go to forums, learn with colleagues, lab work, etc. But I truly believe that you're absolutely correct. I think structured work is structured studying. It's completely the loop. It needs to be replaced.
I think so. We have. We won't mention them, but we have some, internal training tools that's also internal. We use a third-party training tool, and there's a lot of content on there. But you look at how quickly even just the Teams interface changes and new features come in and things are being added to it. It just feels too fast for the likes of those to be able to create the stuff and then publish them.
It's definitely a challenge. It's definitely become more challenging, hasn't it? I think somehow you need to find a middle ground between the two, because you're right. That kind of prefabricated content, which 6 months down the line doesn't resemble the product anymore, which we're seeing, all the time happen now, is problematic. How do they keep on maintaining those and updating them? It's almost impossible. But on the other side of it, the community, there's just so much information available and of varying quality and reliability
Yes.
as well. So, you know, when you go onto a vendor who kind of training portal, you know, that's information on there curated from people that you trust. They're kind of, you know,
Yeah.
the sources which should be vetted, and you know that the material is going to be reliable. But I think the community-based learning kind of opens the door to anybody putting content on there, and it may be right, it may be wrong, and I think that's probably for me that's where there's a bit of a gap. I do think we need a way for training material to kind of organically update and us to be able to get the latest available in a medium that is easy to consume. But I don't know whether it's just forums. You know, I go onto forums and I garner a lot of information from them, but does that replace my need to spend 3 hours going through some structured training material? I'm not sure it 100% does. I think there's a time and a place still for that. And if I want to learn a topic that I don't know a lot about, then I think probably I would want that kind of more structured training.
The zero to hero stuff, I think, yes, the structured training still needs to be, because you need to understand the methodology and the logic behind it all. So I think that's fine. There does need to be a way for that to be updated far quicker, and ideally at the time that the changes are made, you know. So maybe, you know, if we take Microsoft, for example, and this isn't a slight on them, but if they're going to change the product, part of that product release needs to be that the content is then updated at the point of release. So, you know, and I think they're pretty good at it in general. But you know, how many times do you go and search for something on the internet? So how do I do this? How do I do that? And you get there and you look at it, and you look at the instructions and go, yeah, and you get to a bit, it's like, oh, hang on, I haven't got that. That's in the wrong place, or that menu's not there, or, you know, whether it's work related or not, that community piece, that's where it sort of, I think, falls down, is when you get into the version history, because once you've uploaded it onto, I don't know, pick on YouTube, it's there. Do you go and take it down afterwards and recreate a new one when the next version comes out? Probably not.
It almost needs to be a bit more like the way that updates to Wikipedia occur. You know, they are almost in real time. You know, you hear about news of somebody, a celebrity or something, and no sooner as that news hit the tabloids, Wikipedia is updated to reflect that. But it also gets updated by other members. So if it becomes, if what's put in that update is not factual or changes, then it quickly gets amended to be factual. So if you had kind of, I guess, documentation or learning material about a particular topic, and that's changing, let's say Microsoft introduce a new feature to the way that, you know, and this happens all the time, there's a new configuration item within a call queue, and if that comes out and then the material related to call queues, whether it's Microsoft documentation or some kind of learning material, gets automatically updated by the community, but is kind of vetted by the community as well to make sure it's accurate, then I think that then becomes a more trustworthy source of information. I think the problem at the moment is, where do you go? Like, where do you find that update happened? At the moment, you find a lot of blogs about issued by different people, which are released at different points in time of different qualities. And I think that method of learning is perhaps unreliable.
Be interesting to see whether or not the introduction of Microsoft Loop kind of changes that, because you could theoretically create a training guide that is just in one place. It's a static document. It's always the same place you go. And yet, if you change one of the menu options or something, you go to the back end Excel spreadsheet or whatever it is, you've got it configured, and you make the change in there, bang, all of a sudden your technical documentation is straight up to scratch. So I think maybe the technologies are coming in to support that more up to date, accurate place of learning. But you've still got so many different places to go. You'd need almost one reference library, wouldn't you?
It's a bit more agile way of maintaining documentation, isn't it? I think at the moment the problem, we even see this with Microsoft documentation, that it's several months behind what's available, and that's difficult for us as, you know, people who sometimes need to quote technical information from sources, and we find that even Microsoft documentation doesn't reflect necessarily what's been released already to the public, and it comes a little bit later. But I think the problem is that there's too much emphasis on making sure that that's 100%, that what is updated in that document has gone through various different review cycles, and that means that it takes time to get released. Whereas perhaps I think people are now a little bit more forgiving about, you know, grammatical errors and things like that. They more just want to get the technical information out as quickly as possible and to hear about it. If it then, after it goes live, it then gets vetted and improved, I think that's so acceptable to people these days.
What's that saying? Perfection is the enemy of progress, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think
that's the one.
I think, you know, when we're not in a world where software vendors release things every 6 months, and there's, you know, you go from version 1 to version 2, and you know that the next one's not going to come out for ages, so there's plenty of time for them to release documentation. We're getting updates to software almost daily in some cases. You know, there's not enough time to go through that you know, rigorous review cycle process that I think probably is still embedded into some organizations.
So something else that people need to change, eh?
Sorry, what were you going to say? The case that we can lab stuff. Most of the time I can lab stuff in advance and just prove it will work, because things are changing all the time. So I do believe there is a little bit of, you know, learning on the job, labbing stuff and implementing new items according to the documentation, following the documentation, working on it. I cannot learn myself by just reading a document. I actually had to implement something to learn, and depends on the individual.
Yeah, no, that's very true. In which case there's then also a question about whether or not the labs that people provide are up to date.
Exactly.
Okay, fair enough. So it's like another thing. All we do on these things is we just put the world to rights, tell people what they need to do, and then wait for them to obviously go and do it. Brilliant. Okay. I think we're probably about there. Thank you both very,
for my
very much.
voice, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think you need to go. You need to go and get some lozenges or something like that.
I definitely do, don't I? And I've got my COVID jab tomorrow, so.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
I can't use that excuse.
Chris, we can expect a day off coming up. All right.
Oh, no.
No,
no more days off. I had enough.
You're not like that. No. Cool. Thank you very much, both. So just a reminder, we have Paula Smith, consultant, and Chris Irons, managing consultant. That was episode 20. We will be back for episode 21 in a couple of weeks' time. That will be the last one for 2021. So thank you both. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope we'll see you back at some point.
Take care, everybody.
Sure you will. Thanks, Pete.
Lovely. Thank you.
This is the Mod Pod, brought to you by Modality, helping businesses optimize their Microsoft technologies everywhere.